Trezell and Jacqueline West are on trial for the murder of their sons, Orrin and Orson. The children are believed to be dead, but their bodies have not been found. Today, the case was turned over to the jury for deliberation. Hey everybody, welcome to the True Crime Squad. I'm Kristi Brower, here with my sister, co-host, and partner in crime, Katie Weaver. Hey Katie.
Hello.
How's it going?
Oh, it's going good.
Oh, well, good. I heard a big crash right before we went live, so I wasn't sure what was going on over there.
Oh yeah. No, yeah, I knocked a big crystal sphere on the floor. So it rolled across the floor over next to the plants and I'll have to worry about it later. Thank God the dog in my office is
Yikes.
sleeping behind me, but
Right?
yeah.
Your dogs are little. They could get squished by something like that.
Oh yeah, it would be a disaster. Yeah,
Yeah.
crazy thing. So anyway, he's fine. I'm fine. It's all fine. I don't know about the crystal. We'll find out.
Hopefully it's fine as well.
It was like a
Fingers crossed.
baseball-sized clear quartz sphere. Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah. Clumsy. Just fine motor skills aren't my best attribute. But today I was thinking about all the weddings we have this summer. We have so many of our like cousins and nieces or our nephews getting married and just
Yeah.
a summer like that. And I was thinking about that and I suddenly had this panic moment of realizing that for a wedding in just a few weeks, we were asked to make a sign that I completely forgot about. And I
Oh.
went, "Oh my god." So I texted my cousin and said, "Oh, do you guys still need that?" She's like, "Well, yeah, if you guys can do it." Oh my gosh. I said, "What was it?" I can't even
What
remember.
does it say again? Whoops.
I have Valo brain. I don't know what else to say. I'm
Right?
still in the zone. Anyway, I must be coming out of it because at least I remembered that I forgot something. So there's that.
Well,
But
that is good. That is good. Yes, I
yeah.
hear you. I am trying to just get back to normal function this week. And I had a doctor's appointment today. And my doctor said, "Did you want to talk about anything else? Or could we, talk about Lori Vallow?" This is our lives, you guys. Everybody knows what we
Yeah.
do. Everywhere we go, people are
Oh
like,
yeah.
"But the trial, but
Yep.
but the trial." Yeah. So we got to get it together
Yeah. Yeah.
about some other cases because it turns out we have other cases.
And this one is such a big one. It is one that's
Mm,
so dear to our hearts. We
it is.
started following this case when these little children first went missing. We've been on it the whole time.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm terrified.
Yeah. I
I'm
am too.
terrified.
So we are talking about the murder trial of Orrin and Orson West. Their parents, and I know everyone says adoptive a lot, but that kind of bothers me as an adoptive parent.
Hmm.
When you adopt a child, you legally become their parents.
Yeah.
And I don't want adoptive to let them off the hook at all.
No.
And and I hear that a lot, but they were their parents.
I don't know if off the hook is to me, it's like it makes it worse, you know?
Yeah,
Worse
they're
that
kind
they
of that, but yeah.
adopted these children and promised to, take care of them. And instead they went ahead and killed them.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So we are talking about Trezell and Jacqueline West.
Yeah.
So the case went to the jury today. So we're going to give you a
Yeah.
little recap of this case in case you're not familiar or just in case it's been a while since you heard about it. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what happened with closing arguments today as it has headed to the jury.
Yeah.
So this all started on December 21st of 2020.
Yeah.
And that that night, Trezell and Jacqueline report that their 3 and 4-year-old are missing.
Yeah.
They say that Trezell was outside gathering firewood while Jacqueline was in the house wrapping presents, because this was just a few days before Christmas.
Hmm.
And that Orrin and Orson were outside playing in the backyard. And Trezell went back in the house for a minute. When he came back, the boys were gone.
Mm-hmm.
So they said that they looked all over, couldn't find them, called the police. So, as should happen, the California City Police arrived. This is in California City, obviously.
Yeah.
A sheriff's search and rescue team arrived, and a highway patrol helicopter arrived. And the news of the kids missing spread very quickly in the community, and volunteers showed up like crazy. Like, people came out of the woodwork to come look for these little boys.
Strangers showed out for these kids right and left.
Absolutely. And so did law enforcement. I mean, they immediately took it seriously, and they went to looking for these boys. What we didn't know at the time is that Officer Brian Hansen from California City Police spoke to the West's 4 other children, four boys,
Mm-hmm.
and they all said that they had not seen Orrin or Orson in weeks.
Yep.
And we didn't know that at the time. That came out at trial.
Yeah.
So investigators went through their home, of course, and they collected some evidence, and they, took it away as people are looking for these kids. Because, of course, they're looking in the house for anything that would indicate anything that's gone wrong. In this house, it was not so much what they found as what they didn't find.
Yeah.
So it was Christmas. There were gifts under the tree for 4 children, a home of 6. There were stockings for 4 children. There were 6.
Yeah.
There did not appear to be the toys and clothes and diapers and other, as you know, toddlers carry a huge amount of accessories.
Right.
And those things.
The diapers got me.
Yes.
No dirty diapers in the trash. No wet wipes.
1 diaper.
Yep.
And they tested it for DNA. A dirty diaper. They tested it for DNA, and it was one of the older boys.
Okay.
It was like the 6-year-old. There was no indication in the garbage.
No.
There were no clean diapers in the house to indicate that there were diapers for children of smaller sizes. Like, there were a lot of different sizes of diapers, and not.
There were no sippy cups. There were no little children's dining things. Nothing.
Yeah, nothing to indicate that these 2 boys had been in that home.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, the police look everywhere for these kids.
Yeah.
And so does the community. But they're also then turning back on the parents, because the West's children immediately say, we haven't seen them in weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, about 3 months before this, the Wests had moved from Bakersfield, California to California City.
Mm-hmm.
And the more they started looking at things, they start discovering that nobody at this California City house has seen these babies.
Yep.
They've seen the family around with how many kids? 4.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There's no, they looked at ring cams and security cams from neighbors. They did not find these little boys on camera.
Yep.
They're finding nothing to indicate that these kids ever even lived in this house.
Yeah.
So, of course, they search the house. They take the parents' cell phones. They search the home again the next day.
Yeah.
Then the FBI digs up their backyard.
Yeah.
Right away, they know that they've got some questions and issues with the kids.
Yeah.
So then on December 28th, a social worker interviews the West's oldest child. He was 10 at the time. And he tells her that he saw Orrin vomit and die at the Bakersfield apartment where they lived in roughly September of 2020.
Yeah.
He says that he agreed to keep quiet about this because his parents told him that if anybody found out, they could split up their family.
Yeah.
What a burden to place on a 10-year-old child.
Right. Terrible. What a thing to do to him.
Right. He also tells the social worker that he doesn't know what happened to Orrin's body.
Yep.
And he says that they moved to California City a week later, and shortly after, Orrin just disappeared.
Is this the brother that said he heard a bump in the night? That he heard something in the night?
Yes, I think so.
One of the kids said it, because all of the kids actually.
Yes, all of the kids
Eventually.
confirmed that they have not seen Orrin or Orson in a long time, that they don't know where they are. There's a lot of different stories that get told, that they were with their biological grandma, that they were with Trezell's mother. You know, there are a lot of stories told, but no one can confirm having seen these children in months.
Right. Now, the older kids were not home, right? When the police were called?
Right.
The kids, they were at grandma's house.
Yeah. Yep. They were at grandma's house, you know, where you would think all the kids would be if they were doing, you know, some Christmas stuff at grandma's house, but no.
Right.
Orrin and Orson weren't there.
Yeah.
So then on December 29th, the California City Police Chief tells the media that foul play is suspected and that nothing was found in the West's backyard. And then we start hearing some statements issued by extended family. And there's talk of getting a private investigator, and there's talk that the West don't think the police are doing enough to find the boys.
Yeah.
Because the police are running on a very different theory than what the West have told them.
Yeah.
And at this point, I don't believe that they know what their kids said either.
No, I think not, because they took those kids into CPS custody immediately.
They did. All of the kids went into CPS custody because they report that their siblings have been missing for months.
Right.
Of course, they're not going to leave those kids in that home.
No.
So the Wests have 2 biological children. They've adopted 2 different sets of brothers. And at the time, the oldest one was 10. So they were all pretty little.
Yeah.
So over time in January, a reward is offered for the boys. It starts at $25,000, goes up to $100,000 from multiple people in the community helping with that. And the police, start putting out, public pleas. If you saw anyone trespassing on the West property, if you saw anything, please tell us.
Right.
They go to the house again. They use ground penetrating radar. They don't find anything in the ground. There are several candlelight vigils that are held. One in California City. One was held in Bakersfield, where they lived before they were adopted.
Well, and Bio Family is all over this. They have been searching. They've been there. There's been real high tensions between the 2 families. It's been very hard. Yeah.
It's been very hard. The biological family of Orrin and Orson, they start raising money to put up billboards. There are protesters outside the Department of Human Services. Tensions are high everywhere. And then you start seeing what happens, which is what happens a lot of times in missing children's cases, is that people all over the country start getting involved.
Yeah.
They're tracking the case, sharing information, in case these kids have been taken away from where they were, supposedly last seen. Sure. But in March of 2021, the Bakersfield Police Department takes over the investigation because they think that really the kids went missing in Bakersfield.
Yeah.
So they do a bunch more searching. They search a bunch of other places that are nearer to where they lived in Bakersfield in hopes that maybe, they're going to find some evidence there. Mm-hmm. They serve a search warrant on March 12th at the home of the boys' adoptive grandmother. And the reward then increases to $125,000. Trezell West's mother, Wanda West, releases a statement, asking for help to look for her grandsons. She writes about losing them and also the other 4 children and about how CPS took them into custody.
Yeah.
In June of 2021, police say that they have served 44 warrants in relation to this case. They've interviewed 83 people.
Yeah.
And they've seized 170 items in the investigation. So the police are working hard. And there was sort of a period where we didn't hear very much about what was going on with this case. But it's clear when you look back on it now that the police were doing all kinds of stuff. They were just being very quiet about it.
Which is interesting because the public was very unhappy at that point.
Right.
Feeling like the police were not taking this seriously, that they weren't doing anything. And then as it turned out, it couldn't be further from the truth.
Right. Not at all. They were just working behind the scenes and doing it quietly.
Well, and there was so much family.
Yeah.
And honestly, so much kind of deceitful or at least low-key deceitful stuff going on. I think it had to have been really hard for the police to sort out, like, who's telling the truth here and who's
Right. Who
just
to even
blatantly
listen to.
lying. Yeah.
In September, Charles Pettis, who is the biological father of one of the boys, files a wrongful death and negligence lawsuit against Child Protective Services for removing the children from his custody.
Yeah.
There were some questions about if these kids were even removed from parental custody correctly, if they were actually legally had severed parental rights in order to be adopted. There were a lot of questions about that, if this was even handled right.
Yeah.
I still don't think that we know the answers to those questions.
Right.
And then on March 1st of 2022, Trezell and Jacqueline West are indicted by a grand jury on charges of second-degree murder. And they're arrested. And when they were arrested, they were like living in a van, weren't they?
Like a motorhome. Yeah. And somebody in a gas station recognized them and called the police. Yeah.
They had kind of gone on the run, sort of, but they hadn't left the area really, but they were kind of living transiently at this point.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It should be pointed out that they were living on the stipend that they were receiving from the state for these children, which was $4,000 a month.
Yeah.
And they lost that when this all came down.
Yeah.
On March 2nd, 2022, District Attorney Cynthia Zimmer has a press conference. She says the boys' bodies have not been found, but they have enough direct and circumstantial evidence to convince the grand jury that the boys were murdered. So she does make it public that it's believed that Orrin and Orson died in September of 2020, about 3 months before they were reported missing.
Yeah.
Trezell and Jacqueline pled not guilty also on March 3rd of 2022. And then there's a big attorney fight that goes on, where the defense attorneys, so Timothy Hennessy, lead attorney for Trezell West, and Alexia Torres Stallings, lead attorney for Jacqueline West, they hold a press conference and they accuse prosecutor Zimmer of spreading false information. So then the judge issues a gag order on this case.
Yeah.
And then we really didn't hear anything for a long time because, from other cases like the Brian Koberger case, gag orders mean we don't get to know what's going on. So we don't hear much for a while. Then in June of 2022, Ryan Dean, who is the biological mother of Orrin and Orson, and her mother file a $40 million lawsuit. Then they amend it to seek $100 million for alleged civil rights violations. What they said is that the suit against the state and county stems from the decision to remove the children from their biological parents and then place them in a dangerous situation with the Wests.
Yeah.
In 2016, Dean was suspected of child abuse after she took her oldest son, Orrin, to a hospital for a broken leg.
Yeah.
According to the lawsuit, she filed reunification requests and completed parenting classes to regain custody, but that she was never given him back.
Yeah.
In 2017, she gave birth to Orson, who was removed from her custody a week later. So you may or may not know, but when a woman has children in CPS custody, it is pretty standard practice that if she has another child, for that child to immediately also to go into CPS custody.
Yeah.
If things are still under investigation, or they've determined that it's not a safe place for the older child, then they, it's fairly common.
Yeah.
It's a fairly common belief that if it's not safe for an older child, it's certainly not safe for an infant.
Yeah.
So that is fairly standard practice. It's not 100% of the time, but a pretty significant amount of the time.
Yeah.
So opening statements were presented in the West trial on March 28th of 2023. This trial had a lot of delays. And even within the trial itself, there were a lot of delays where they would take like a whole week off at a time.
Yeah.
So the prosecutor is alleging that the boys died in September 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And the Wests are alleging that an unidentified accomplice took the kids.
Okay.
Right, but with absolutely, they don't have any evidence at all of who that would be, or
No.
they don't really have a theory other than we didn't do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so this case has been now before the jury for a couple of months. And it's a very circumstantial case. They do not have the children's bodies.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a confession. They don't have any forensic evidence. What they have is the word of the kids when they were first picked up by the police, and then the older son when he was interviewed by the social worker. So what the defense has done is attack the credibility of the police officer and the social worker, and attack their abilities as far as their ability to do impartial questioning of child victims, because kids are very easily swayed, or they're very impressionable. You can just say something that they will think that's what you want them to say, and then they'll say that back to you, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So that's the main battle going on here, is that the prosecution has the statements of the kids, plus a lot of other investigation in which they can prove that there's absolutely no evidence that those kids ever lived at that house.
Yeah.
There's no one ever saw those boys or could describe them. The neighbors, anybody with a ring cam, anybody like that. So today, I don't know. This case makes me very nervous, honestly.
It does. I mean, they did bring up, people they didn't investigate, things they didn't do.
Yeah.
I still think the testimony of the kids is very, very damning.
It is.
It is a little bit inconsistent, depending on who interviewed them. The forensic psychologist that testified for the defense, she was really a piece of work, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And one thing she said was that, of course, she was picking apart the techniques, but what she's claiming is implantation.
Yeah.
That basically the police implanted into these kids' heads what the narrative they wanted them to run with, and then that's just what they've been regurgitating. Honestly, though, the fact that the stories did change somewhat here and there makes me think that's not true.
Right. I mean, I would expect the stories to change a little bit with
They're
small
little kids.
children.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and then Wanda West was on the stand most recently, and oh my God. She's also not a credible witness. I think that, well, maybe this was the first time she ever really told the truth. Not an honest witness she just, maybe she was when she finally got on the stand, but boy, it sure seems like she's covered a lot for them.
She has a lot, and Trezell and Jacqueline's stories have changed significantly multiple times.
Oh yeah.
It's very hard to believe them, because their initial interviews versus the next, other times that they were questioned, and things they said about each other that were conflicting. It's not very it's not clear at all.
No, one of the things that the prosecutor said in his close was that they have committed many overt acts, which, overt acts is something we heard a lot about in the close for Lori Vallow.
Right.
talking about all the overt acts, like the moving around, like the uh, having kids at different houses at different times, like keeping things kind of confused and discombobulated, and then a lot of the lies that they told, and told conflicting lies to various family members and things like that. Like it's been a hotbed of lies from both of them,
It has.
which we
Well,
know
and
that for sure.
then there was the time that they were trying to maneuver getting visits with their children while they were in jail, while the kids were in
Yeah,
CPS custody.
yeah,
And they were very intent on getting to speak to their children,
hmm,
which I found very concerning,
yeah, yeah,
considering that the statements about what's happened to at least one of
yeah,
these children, and when they stopped being around anymore,
hmm,
came from the kids.
yeah,
They were very intent on getting visits with them,
yeah,
and that's really concerning because the kids are witnesses in their trial.
yeah.
So, what do you think? What do you think is going to come back from the jury?
I'm worried. I'm worried. I don't know. I mean, there's on one hand, how could they not? It's the overt acts, it's the lies, it's the confusion, it's the lack of evidence, it's things like trying to claim that they would have pushed that gate open at the California City House to sneak out. That
Yes.
gate was hard for a grown man. It was a big steel gate or iron gate, and it was hard for a grown man to push open. And they're claiming these little children pushed through it.
Yeah.
The fact that the dogs that were searching for them didn't pick up much of a scent of them at all at the house, if any. Uh,
No.
there a lot of those things I think is gonna speak to the jury.
Well, and Trezell and Jacqueline pointed fingers at each other about that gate,
Mhm,
about which one of them had closed it.
mhm.
Their statements about the other person were inconsistent when the police talked to them initially.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah, I had trouble with the gate too because these are little tiny kids, guys.
yeah.
They're 3 and
They were itty
4.
bitty. Also, the timing of why that moment did they decide to call and say that these kids were missing, being
Right?
totally unprepared in the house to represent that the kids were there? I
Yeah.
guess those are things they just didn't think about. Uh,
Well,
I'm
something else.
convinced that they're guilty. I am.
I am too. Something else that they told police is that they didn't think that the police could speak to their children without their permission,
Interesting.
which I found very interesting
Mhm.
because that's not true at all. And the kids
Yeah.
can have a representative with them or a special kind of interrogator, all that kind of stuff. But certainly the kids could be questioned without the parents' permission and without the parents present, given this situation. But they believed that the kids couldn't be questioned, and
Yeah.
so they thought they couldn't speak against them,
Mhm.
which was interesting. There was
Yeah.
certainly the oldest child was fearful that something bad would happen
Mhm.
to their family if he were to
Yeah,
tell this story.
I know.
And, he says that he made an agreement with his parents that he wouldn't tell anyone and that
I
they
feel
asked him to
so
promise
yeah,
not to tell anyone, which is awful,
it's
awful to do.
horrifying. I feel so sorry for that little boy.
Yeah,
And
I do
that's
too.
part of it, that, his testimony in saying things like that, you're really here to tell me that all of that was just an implanted memory?
Right.
All of that?
Particularly
Like,
because
that doesn't
he was
resonate.
saying basically the same story from the beginning.
Yeah.
And all of the kids have been saying maybe the timelines aren't exact because these are little kids
Yeah.
and they're
The
not going to
timelines are
remember
not
the timeline.
exact
But basically, what they're saying is, we haven't seen our brothers in a long time.
in a long time. Yep.
They haven't been here with us.
No.
Why would kids say that if it weren't true? You
Right.
know?
That's a weird thing for a kid to say at any
Right.
time that
Yeah.
lived under the same roof. Especially because one of the things that they said about these kids is that they both cried a lot.
Yeah.
They were unhappy, unsettled little guys, and they both cried a lot. And for kids who were always crying and pretty challenging, you'd think they would know that they weren't there, you know?
Right. Right.
There was also the 16-year-old that testified that was a former
Yes.
foster child.
Yeah.
who said that that they disciplined the kids by hitting them with a belt, and that when the babies wouldn't stop crying, the little ones wouldn't stop crying, that Jacqueline would put them in a headlock and wrestle them
Or
down
choke
into,
them.
or a chokehold, yeah, and wrestle them down to, and choking them to make them stop crying.
Yeah.
Can you imagine doing that to make a kid stop crying?
No.
Or doing that at all, obviously, but uh what?
But how fearful these
Yeah.
little guys' lives must have been.
And again, the 16-year-old had no reason to lie. None.
No, he didn't. He had been a foster child of theirs, but
Yeah.
they didn't adopt him, so he was not with them at this time. But
Yeah. And of course, the ongoing question of how did CPS allow this shit to happen? How did they allow this to happen?
there are still a lot of questions about the placement of the boys with them, the speed at which the adoption occurred.
Yeah,
You
because
know,
there was a foster mom before them. These
yes,
weren't these they weren't the boys' first placement. There was a foster
no,
mom before them who thought she was adopting the boys. She
right,
had been going through the process to adopt them, and her grade school daughter went to school and had a scratch on her leg. And for that scratch, CPS was called,
yeah,
and they instantly removed the boys from her house, and almost immediately the Wests adopted them.
yes,
There was no action taken against her whatsoever. CPS
no.
just asked some questions about the scratch and it was over. But because of that, but then when you back up to BioMom, there's significant evidence there that the state didn't do their right due diligence to even remove them from her care.
Well, or bio dad
Yeah. Yeah.
or dad's. There's two dads,
There's two dads.
but
Uh,
were their parental rights even actually legally severed? We're not sure.
well, one of
Mhm.
them swears, one dad swears that he was not contacted in any way and that he would have happily taken his boy had he known that that was going on. But he wasn't even given the option,
And he was
which
in a different
again
state,
is a
and
violation of his rights. Yeah.
right, it is. It is a violation of his rights, and I know that every state handles these things differently. But I am an adoptive parent. I'm a
Mhm.
foster adoptive parent. I fostered. We fostered our son and then adopted him out of the system.
Mhm.
And there's a process by which parents' rights are severed that has to be followed before a child can go up for adoption in a
Mhm.
situation like this, where it isn't voluntary on the part of the parents. And so there's a
Yeah.
lot of questions here about should these kids have ever even been in the West Care to begin with?
Right. Right.
But yeah, so many questions, only some of which were answered in the trial, I feel like.
Yeah. Yes.
I didn't feel like
And they
we
called
brought,
63 witnesses.
they
I
did.
mean, they did their due diligence. I think they're going to get their guilty verdict. I do. I'm kind of confident. I think that they will. I feel like they are going to get it. I feel like there'll be appeal upon appeal. I particularly dislike Jacqueline's attorney.
Mm,
Uh, just everything about her, the things that she said, her acidity. I just did not like her at all.
mhm.
But I wasn't 1,000% sold on the prosecutor either. I don't know. The whole thing has just it's felt terrible from the beginning and it doesn't feel any better now. And part
No.
of that probably is because we don't have a clue where these little ones are.
Right. No idea where they are. There was a witness who saw Trezell returning from somewhere with a cooler, and there
Mhm.
was some speculation that their bodies had been dumped in a landfill. As little as they are, and as long as it has been, they'll never find them.
No,
We
if
know
that's
that. We've
true, they'll
seen
never
this
find
happen
them.
before with
Yeah.
other little kids, and if that's the case, they
Oh
won't
man.
ever find them.
Landfill is one of the worst case scenarios.
It
Oh,
is.
especially in big areas.
Mm-hmm.
A place like ours, that might not be the worst place to have to, suss out a body, but in these larger communities that have so much
Yeah.
garbage service,
No, the body can be buried under hundreds of tons of garbage in just a couple of days.
yeah, yeah,
And the trash itself speeds up decomposition, and
yeah,
so it wouldn't take very long for a body to just be bones.
yep.
Yeah, it's terrible. That's the
Mhm.
saddest part, I think, is that where's any closure unless their bodies are found,
Right.
or at least someone
Mhm.
speaks about where they are. there's no closure for anybody in this situation. These boys just disappeared into thin air.
Yeah. People in the courtroom today said that while the prosecutor was offering his closing statements, that people were sobbing.
Yeah.
It's such a sad, terrible case.
It is.
And I hope that they both catch the fullest penalty that can possibly be given in this case. I hope they get a full conviction. And the jury's out. It's in the jury's hands as we speak.
Yeah. So we will let you know as soon as the jury is back.
Yeah.
And what their verdict is. But this is, a no-body murder case they're very challenging.
They are, but they actually have a better conviction rate because they won't take them to trial unless they really have their shit together.
Right. They've got to feel very confident about what they do have.
Mm-hmm.
Or you end up in a Barry Morphew situation.
Did you see that jerk did an interview this week?
Yes.
Oh, God.
Such a creep.
Yeah. That's a conversation for another day, but that's another one.
It is, right. It is, and it is another case where we may never know.
Yeah.
But that is what we know about the West trial, and we'll keep you updated about what comes up in that case and what the jury has to say. So,
yeah.
I'm glad we're back to more content. It feels good to be talking about some other cases.
Yeah. Yeah. However, lots of movement actually in Valo, so we'll have plenty to share tomorrow night on case updates.
Yeah, so Wednesday, 7 p.m. Mountain is our case updates live stream. We do have a lot in the Valo case and many others. So we will be back with all of that tomorrow night.
Yes.
And you know what? We are the True Crime Squad. Thanks for being here.
Take care.